Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
So I suppose we could start by going over the highlights of the J.D. Vance acceptance speech last night. The parts where he didn't tell lies or spin or distortions.
And so tonight, Mr. Chairman, I stand here humbled, and I'm overwhelmed with gratitude to say I officially accept your nomination to be Vice President of the United States of America.
Not a lie. Still not lying. I gave a lot of his biography and included this. I like this, actually.
Now, I left the Marines after 4 years and went to the Ohio State University.
Michigan delegation didn't like that.
I'm sorry, Michigan. I had to get that in there. Come on. We've had enough political violence. Let's...
And then he concluded.
Thank you. God bless all of you, and God bless our great country.
And between those points, there was a lot of bullshit. CNN's fact checker, Daniel Dale.
I want to start with a claim that J.D. Vance made in his speech. He strongly suggested that, in contrast to Joe Biden, Donald Trump opposed the invasion of Iraq. Listen.
When I was a senior in high school, that same Joe Biden supported the disastrous invasion of Iraq. Somehow, a real estate developer from New York City by the name of Donald J. Trump was right on all of these issues while Biden was wrong.
This claim is highly misleading at best. In reality, Donald Trump was supportive of the invasion of Iraq. When he was asked 6 months before the invasion by Howard Stern whether he was for an invasion, he said, quote, "Yeah, I guess so. I wish the first time it was done correctly." Then 2 months before the invasion, he said on Fox News that President Bush, and this is a direct quote, has either got to do something or not do something, perhaps. Not the words of an explicit opponent. Now, he did become an opponent of the war in 2004, but Vance's suggestion that Trump was on the opposite side of Biden on the question of starting the war, that Trump got this invasion question right while Biden was wrong, and that's just not true. And that was not, Anderson, the only assertion tonight that was misleading or flat wrong, and I'll give you just some of them. A former Trump advisor, Peter Navarro, who's fresh out of prison, falsely claimed Jack Smith prosecuted him. Smith did not. A Florida Congressman, Mike Waltz, mocked Biden for allegedly being focused on building electric tanks. That is pure fiction. Biden has made no push for electric tanks, though the Army does want some other vehicles to be electrified. Various speakers depicted a country with rampant crime and violence without acknowledging that violent crime is now lower than it was in Donald Trump's last year in office, 2020. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich said Trump orchestrated an orderly end to the war in Afghanistan. Trump didn't actually orchestrate a withdrawal at all. Gingrich also claimed no U.S. soldier was killed in nearly 2 years there. There was not any 2-year period under Trump when 0 U.S. troops were killed in Afghanistan. And finally, conservative commentator Kimberly Guilfoyle, Donald Trump Jr.'s fiancée, declared that Trump handed Joe Biden a booming economy. You might remember what things were actually like in January 2021. The unemployment rate was 6.4%.
Over at MSNBC, Chris Hayes watching as the de facto fact checker on their set and pundit desk?
I mean, first of all, I think the approach was a kind of do no harm approach, right? Particularly because this is a guy who went on Tucker Carlson and said the country was ruled by like angry, jealous cat ladies who want to make everyone as miserable as they are. He's the one who tweeted that Democrats basically have blood on their hands after Assassin's Bullet missed the president. Like, his rhetorical mode is incredibly aggressive.
When he was against Trump, he said, what proportion of the U.S. population has Donald Trump sexually assaulted?
Yes.
I mean, that's the kind of, that's what his natural tone is.
That is his natural tone. This was not that tone, which I think was a deft choice if you're introducing him to the country, not to like berate the miserable cat ladies. I think was probably smart rhetorically.
As a cat guy, Can we leave the cats out of this? What's up with that?
Substantively, he did this riff about Joe Biden's political career in which he did say some true things. The trade deals that Joe Biden did in fact favor. Trade deals which he said Donald Trump opposed, which is also true. Donald Trump did oppose NAFTA and most favored nation status.
The thing about NAFTA that's always confused me is if you don't want folks pouring across our border for jobs, wouldn't you want there to be job creation where they are? They being the non-resident migrant coming to the United States for jobs. Wouldn't you? I mean, look, I'm no economist. I didn't draft NAFTA. I'm not a NAFTA wonk. I just kind of get the gist of it being some shared economic collaboration between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico, where there was some job creation south of our border, specifically in the meat-producing industry, where a lot of folks now come into this country and work illegally in the meat-producing industry. Make this make sense. How does this jibe with border policy?
He said Donald Trump opposed the Iraq war, which is not true, and a thing we had to litigate over and over and over in 2016. Yep. He also seemed to make it that the Iraq war, we lived through it, was a democratic war. It was not. It was run by George W. Bush, probably ardently supported by many of the people in that hall with him.
Yes.
I was there, actually, for that convention that year.
It's as if the modern GOP has stared at the Men in Black. What was the little pin that the brain scrambler that they would lose all they have lost all memory of themselves in 2001 through 2008. They were the ones pining for an invasion into Iraq. And a lot of us on the left, can I just tell you, I'm working morning radio at a pop station in Little Alexandria, Louisiana, and I dare to be vocally opposed to us invading Iraq. I didn't see the sense in it. I just didn't. And there was a lot of trumped up but not that I understood that, but I just kind of understood it didn't make sense to invade a country over something that could be handled with, as it turned out, a SEAL team in the midnight hours with a couple of helicopters. Even I understood that, and I was just a dumb radio DJ back then and caught a lot of flack for that. There are people who I'm sure I could call on and say, do you remember when I was in Cuddle? Yes, absolutely. But I was a nobody. Hell, I'm still a nobody. But back then, you were branded unpatriotic if you dared speak ill of the idea of invading a sovereign country over something that a terror group that we couldn't even at the time really determine if there were ties to had perpetrated. Now that I think about it, this all sort of does make sense because here we are with us revisiting the Iraq War, a huge lie, a big lie, if you will. And now the party that is the party of the big lie is anointing their vice presidential nominee to run in tandem with the perpetrator of the biggest of big lies from 2000. No, I guess it does make sense. You're right. Let's move on.
The last thing I'll just say, which is not really a fact-checking point, but I think is important, is there's a story he's telling about basically the kind of neoliberal gutting of the American industrial base, what it did to those manufacturing towns in America, and how it betrayed the American working man, and that Joe Biden was a symbol of that. And what he left out of that is the Biden economic policy, which has created 800,000 manufacturing jobs and the most remarkable manufacturing investment and insourcing we have seen in generations, is precisely aimed at and has been wildly successful at restoring the American industrial base, focusing on manufacturing jobs, focusing on unionized manufacturing jobs, focusing on those jobs in places that are far away from the enclaves of liberal metropolitan areas.
And jobs for which you specifically do not need a college degree.
Correct.
Yes, exactly.
So this entire sort of story he's telling, which has some truth to it as a matter of history, chops off what has happened in the last 4 years, which has been in some ways a pretty Vance-ish kind of approach to industrial policy.
And by the way, an article that Bradford DeLong, who is a professor of economics at the University of Cal Berkeley, writes in World Finance. Let's revisit this real quick, okay? In the 2 decades from 1979 to 1999, the number of manufacturing jobs in the United States drifted downward from 19 million to 17 million. But over the next decade, between 1999 and 2009, the number plummeted to 12 million. Those first 2 decades, I believe you can look back, 12 of the 20 years you had a GOP president in the White House. 12 of the 20 years in the first 2 decades where American manufacturing jobs went downward by 2 million. And then in that next decade we talk about, 99 to 09, 8 of those 10 years that we had lost another 5 million manufacturing jobs. 8 of those 10 years, GOP president.
The last thing I'll say, and I'm going to beat this drum until I put a tear in it, is that America is producing more oil now than any nation in the history of the world has ever produced ever. So everyone's got their talking points from 2008, and they go up on stage and they say drill baby drill. And the fact of the matter is the spigots are as open as they get. They're turned all the way open. We're just pumping oil out of the ground like no one's ever seen. These are the facts. It just drives me insane. You can say that's bad. You can say that's good. It just is the case that we are right now the global force, the global hegemon in energy in a way we probably haven't ever been in my life.
Yeah, and imagine if the Republicans had that to brag about, you'd never hear the end of it.
Correct.
With Joe Biden having that to brag about, again, arguably, if you want to brag about that, Republicans are not only pretending that it hasn't happened, but attacking them as if they will somehow embody his record instead of him.
And that's part of the problem. Joe Biden doesn't want to brag about the oil production because it's not something that his base is wildly excited about, but it is a fact. This is no different than when Donald Trump swooped into office and bragged about his economic record, especially the first 3 years, obviously, when factually speaking, his 3 years trailed Obama's last 3 years on just about every economic indicator. I'll bear that out in the show notes. I have before, I'm sure, at ronshowatl.com. Employment numbers, GDP growth, so many reasons you could look at those 3 years, his first 3 years, and then Obama's last 3 years and see, this economy is already losing some steam, and that's pre-pandemic. You can look at what Trump managed to achieve in his first 3 years in office economically and clearly look at the tax cuts, the Trump tax cuts. Of course, the ones that expire for those of us who are middle class or lower, while the wealthy get to keep it. Anyway, the tax cuts were like the line of blow, the snort of blow that just kind of gave us that quick false high before things kind of settled back into reality. And again, you look at Obama's last 3 years, you look at Trump's first 3 years. Again, taking the pandemic out of it, taking the housing crash for Obama out of it. Obama's last 3 years versus Trump's first 3 years. That 6-year period, the first 3 years, by most economic indications, were a lot better than the final 3 years. And I mean, cool. Okay, so CNN's fact checkers all over it. MSNBC's fact checkers all over it. I'm not even going to bother looking to see if Fox had a fact checker because they're Fox. Do they check facts? It would derail the entire primetime lineup for them. But the problem is they do this maybe during a big debate or, of course, J.D. Vance's convention speech. But they don't do this the rest of the time while folks are out on the stump continuing perpetrating these lies. And that's the design of the modern GOP, to keep telling lies until the American public, or at least their base, believes it to be absolute rock-ribbed fact. Quick break. Back after this on The Ron Show. Love to give you the show notes. Do that in every blog post that goes with each episode at ronshowatl.com. I always share them on the Facebook page at ronshowatl on Facebook if you'd like. Lawrence O'Donnell had a pretty important point. Lawrence O'Donnell is like a historian, and I get it. He's on MSNBC each weeknight. He's a primetime, left of center guy, but he's also a pretty well-versed historian when it comes to politics. I didn't know this until I went and looked it up, and damn if he's not right.
To the anti-NAFTA stuff, it should be remembered that the NAFTA negotiations began under President Ronald Reagan. They were almost entirely completed under President George H.W. Bush, and then Bill Clinton picked up what had been left, the work done prior to that, and got it passed fairly quickly, mostly with Republican votes. More Republican votes than Democratic votes, okay? That's the history of it. What Donald Trump did with NAFTA is exactly what you do with trade agreements like that, which is they just updated it. It's still NAFTA. It's still there. Everything, the basis of it was still in place. So no one has actually done anything to significantly change NAFTA. And then if you could quote only 2 lines, and this goes to George W. Bush. The disastrous invasion of Iraq. That's what he just called it, the disastrous invasion of Iraq. There was a 2004 convention celebrating that invasion. That convention was held in New York City, and this this pretending it didn't happen, pretending it wasn't us, and applying it to Joe Biden. Joe Biden supported the disastrous invasion of Iraq. That was the sentence, because he voted for it in the Senate, as did most Democratic senators. And then the other one, the line that I think the audience can work on this one themselves. We won't cater to Wall Street. We'll commit to the working man. That's in a Republican vice president's accepting the nomination speech.
Yeah, I'm a little confused by that, too, because J.D. Vance, the presidential nominee for the Trump-Vance ticket in 2024, was actually a venture capitalist working for 2 years in the tech sector in San Francisco, that liberal bastion, San Francisco, from 2016 to 2017. And his running mate, his ticket mate, the guy whose ticket he's on, was constantly pointing to Wall Street for his lavish successes while in office, even though you could look at Wall Street numbers now while certain Joseph Robinette Biden is in office and actually point to some actual successes on when it comes to Wall Street. But it's like we're living in this false or this alternate reality, I call it the upside down, where Donald Trump didn't write a book called The Art of the Deal and talk about his Wall Street savvy, right? It's always somebody else's fault with this party. And even if it's theirs, of course, they don't apologize because we don't apologize. We're America. It's always somebody else's fault. Manufacturing jobs take a tumble for 30 years. And for 20 of those 30 years, you have GOP presidents in the Oval Office. Well, that's not their fault. It's obviously somebody else's fault. It's not their fault. In the minority of those 30 years, and just 1/3 of those 30 years when we're not in power, that's obviously when things really took a shit. NAFTA. Oh, NAFTA destroyed this country. Pay no mind to the fact that 2 Republican presidents really worked hard on negotiating of it, only for the Democratic president to wander in and sign it after a majority Republican Congress approved of it. Pay no mind to the fact that it was a majority Republican effort. And listen, I'm not even railing on NAFTA. I understand the need for there to be well-paying, good-paying jobs in Central America so that we can, of course, have a stabilized economy in those countries so that folks don't need to feel the need to risk their lives, endanger their lives, and travel hundreds of miles by foot sometimes to come to our border for an opportunity if we help create the opportunity there. I fully understand that. But I understand both. I understand the need for that to happen through trade negotiation as a means for substantive immigration policy. The right, however, is like, well, NAFTA's bad because it may have sent some jobs to Mexico, and also we don't want those people coming here for jobs because that's bad for us. Well, how do those two thoughts jibe? I don't really understand how they do. To me, and I've said this many times, the U.S. has played a role, had our hand in so many Central and South American countries, economically, diplomatically, militarily, for more than 150 years. We have played a large role in the destabilization of many of these countries, politically and economically. Well, and by the way, environmentally, if you want to throw in climate change, and we should. We've played a large role in the destabilization of the countries of people who are coming here for an opportunity, and we're just claiming no responsibility whatsoever, and in fact saying, no, get the hell out of here. I liken this to us being that asshole neighbor that decides to burn a big pile of leaves in their backyard and sticks and brush and whatnot. Okay, I get it, cleaning the yard, looking nice for the summer. But while burning the brush fire, they do it on a windy day. They have some fiery debris come scattering across the lawn into your yard, which lights the gazebo on fire. The gazebo lights the house on fire, and you've got fire damage and need somewhere to stay for a few days. So you go to that neighbor and say, hey, do you mind if my family and I just stay in your guest room for a little while until we kind of get our together, in our yard and get the house rebuilt and whatnot? And the neighbor who caused your displacement in the first place goes, no, get out of here. Not my job. And then again, I'm just breathless. This whole rewriting of how the Iraq war unfolded and who was for it and who was against it. Listen, you can sit here and point to Joe Biden and his vote and talk about Donald Trump, who was not in office at the time, and question who supported what and whatnot. But you cannot question it by party. You cannot. Conservative v. liberal v. progressive even. Sorry. it wasn't the left side of the aisle that was wholeheartedly whole hog for a whole-scale invasion of a country half a world away that we were really at the time just starting to question the case for, the intelligence behind. And come to find out, we were all being misled in a large margin by a president and administration, maybe not even but an administration for sure, that really, really wanted, that just gung-ho really wanted to take another shot at Iraq for what a lot of us then at the time deemed to be some very personal Bush family reasons. I mean, it doesn't seem like it wasn't all that long ago for some of us, I'm 50, that we remember a GOP draping themselves in the flag and lavishing praise on the military. And there was a rush of signups, folks who really wanted to go and do what they could to deal with those who perpetrated 9/11 on our soil. And then we sent them to a country where they weren't even a part of this in any way, shape, form, or fashion. And a lot of us, hand raised, were questioning the logic behind that. And yes, some Democrats who were scared of blowback because of all of that voted for it. But that was a GOP-led effort, full stop. It's The Ron Show, back after this.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
I'd like to think of myself as something of an independent-minded Democrat. I am very much of the progressive side of the aisle, the Bernie Sanders wing, if you will. I'm not an independent. I am a Democrat, but I have an independent streak. And I'm going to dive into this conversation about Joe Biden and whether or not he should be atop the ticket. By the way, thoughts and well wishes to the president, as we learned yesterday that he is fighting off the effects of another COVID diagnosis and is now hopping off the campaign trail to rest and better himself in Rehoboth Beach. So my well wishes to the president as he deals with that. Summer COVID is going around. I don't know what the protocol is anymore. It's not social distancing. We don't wear masks, although I do see a lot of people wearing masks. I don't think that's a bad thing. I'm not going to shame anybody for it the way a lot of mouth-breathing knuckle draggers do. That's your decision. I fully understand it. I fully embrace it. If I were in a hospital setting a lot of the times, or I worked in a nursing home or something, I would probably be rocking a mask just out of protection for those folks. Anyway, that's not the headline of the day with regards to President Joe Biden. This is...
We're back with some breaking news. One of the leading Democrats on the Hill is now calling on President Biden to drop out of the race. In an exclusive statement to the LA Times, California Congressman and Senate candidate Adam Schiff says he believes it is time for Biden to pass the torch and secure his legacy of leadership by allowing another Democrat to beat Trump. That new call comes just as NBC News learns that the president has had enough with the questions about his mental acuity and whether he should stay in the race, as he privately conveys the conversations about his future being over. A senior Biden aide says, they tell us they've got a good plan to fight through this.
That from MSNBC's Chris Jansing. We learned later in the night that, and this isn't something that anybody has staked their name to, unnamed sources, gotta love the unnamed sources. Unnamed sources are saying that there are those within Biden's inner circle who are saying that he is now starting to be receptive to at least having the conversation about a potential replacement, that they've been doing some internal polling and some digging into the effectiveness of a Kamala Harris campaign. And this is the mess that Democrats have put themselves in. This is where I remind you, I've got an independent streak, and I'm not ashamed or afraid to turn to within the party here and say, y'all, we really this up. We did not do this right. Okay? Did not do this right from the jump. I've said on many occasions that Joe Biden should have been, from the jump, a one-term president. That should, to me, it would have been the most humble and magnanimous thing for him to do. I kind of understand why he thinks it is his responsibility as leader of the country to fend off the existential threat to democracy that Donald Trump is, in the face of this rising tide of fascist rhetoric from him and the the lockstep. I mean, it's just hard not to look at the way the convention is rolled out, and the MAGA support has just not only just like taken over. Well, actually, yes, taken over a party. I mean, you've got folks who are now having to have abandoned the GOP. I can't believe I live as a 50-year-old man who remembers how the Cheney family was so emblematic of the GOP, and now they're outcasts. They're refugees without a party because of the MAGA movement. So I understand why Joe Biden feels it's his responsibility on his part as the father or the grandfather, I guess if you will, of the country, to somehow stiffen up his back and to make another go of it. But all along, knowing we all knew his age going in. We all knew that like the Joe Biden of 2020, 2021 wasn't the same Joe Biden of 2009 and 2012 when he was on the Democratic ticket as the vice president. We all knew that as time does, it takes its toll, right? We all knew that there's the strong likelihood that is going to continue showing itself before our very eyes. And remember, I said this after a Meet the Press segment a 3 weeks ago, where they showed him from just a 2018 clip, a 2020 clip, and a 2022 clip, and it's like, oh my God, he's getting older. You could just see it within like a 3-minute clip. The Democratic Party handled the primary process poorly, and I'll even like raise my hand a little bit. Listen, I gave an opportunity to Marianne Williamson to appear on my show. I have a full, in fact, I've aired it many times when I've taken days off or during a holiday or something along those lines. I had Marianne Williamson on this show. I extended an invitation as well to Dean Phillips to come on this show. Not that, listen, I'm not sitting here making myself sound important. I am nobody. I do a little podcast on a little online radio station based in Atlanta, Georgia, that also appears on Progressive Voices on demand and on the weekend as well. I am a nobody, but I'm probably, maybe I'm one of the few, and that's part of the problem. But even I was like, I don't know about this Dean Phillips thing. It feels a little insulting, I guess, or dismissive. And I didn't really like the rhetoric he was pushing. But I got to be honest with you. In hindsight, you got to look back now and think, you know what? There were no viable, alternatives to Joe Biden, because obviously there had to have been an effort to temper those viable candidates from stepping up. And no disrespect to Dean Phillips and no disrespect to Marianne Williamson, for their efforts. But they were, from the jump, fringe. Cornel West running independent now. Jill Stein running, Green Party. RFK running independent. You have all, and none of these are viable candidates either. Sorry, not sorry. They're not viable candidates. I have a friend who has decided to hang it up on Facebook with his 164 friends because it's not cutting through to the rest of us how much we're just brainwashed by the bilateral two-party options here, because he's an RFK guy. And an avowed RFK guy. It's kind of nutty, honestly. Former Bernie guy, RFK guy. Sorry, man. That doesn't add up to me. In any event, this is a mess of the Democratic Party's making, because it was only until after the self-professed disastrous debate performance of Joe Biden, who said he had a bad night, to finally then say, oh my God, this came out of nowhere. And I'm not suggesting that there was a cover-up like some on the right are. I'm not suggesting that at all. In fact, I think since the debate, I think Joe Biden has made a steady case that there was no cover-up. Dude's been rocking it. He has gone to event after event after event. He's done how many sit-down interviews now? He's supposed to do one with Univision. I think that one got canceled. He did one with BET. He did one with Lester Holt. He did one with George Stephanopoulos. Who has he left out? Fox News and CBS. I mean, he's done so many interviews and so many rallies since that disastrous debate performance nearly a month ago. Hell, I'm exhausted just thinking about it. Just writing all of the stuff down. He has availed himself. It's not, it's not that he hasn't had the stamina to do the job. And by the way, do the job pretty damn well, if you ask me. You look at the results economically. You look at the results when it comes to energy policy. You look at the we could sit here and talk about the border, but actually, and I've said this many times before, and I will bear it out again in citation in today's show notes at RonShowATL.com. Per capita, Joe Biden's actually meaner at the border than Donald Trump. Turns more away, sends more back by percentage. Yeah, the sheer volume's been a lot more, but also Donald Trump has the pandemic to point to the volume actually coming down. His being mean to people at the border didn't stop the need for people to come to the border. No, the pandemic did that. This is a mess, again, of the Democratic Party's making for not fostering an environment where we could have had a robust primary process. And I don't know how it would have looked to take on the incumbent president within the party. I'm not sure. It's such a unique circumstance, as we're faced with now, honestly, such a unique circumstance that it would have been quirky, no doubt about it, but it don't get much more quirky than what we got right now. And now we're faced with a scenario where I think, and did I say this a week or two ago? I think it's going to happen. I think Joe is going to realize the numbers are what the numbers are. They get a good bit better with Kamala Harris. You throw some other names out there, and there's been some polling done. I can't remember where I saw it. Pete Buttigieg, Gavin Newsom. There's the problem with going with anybody other than Kamala Harris. And I have talked to many people about this. The thing about going with anybody other than Kamala Harris is you cannot piss off the most loyal, fiercely loyal, and reliable portion of the party base. And by that, I mean black women. They have been the backbone, the spine of this party for as long as I can remember. And I don't think you can skip over her. I'm not sure if you make it so that she's got first dibs, or you set it up so it's an easy takeoff for her. I don't know how you do it. I don't even know if you maybe just say, well, since she was the vice president and he got 14 million primary votes, she, vicariously got those 14 million votes too, and that's what happens at the convention. The problem also is because of some new arcane law that they wrote in Ohio. The Democratic Party also needs to sort of have their shit together by August 7th, well ahead of the convention. I'm just asking, why are states putting together ballots before conventions? It used to be that the conventions were where the nominees were figured out, where the ticket was put together. So why are states putting together ballots? Why are there deadlines before conventions? That makes abso-damn-lutely no sense to me. It has to be Kamala Harris. And listen, I'm talking to folks last night about this once word got out that, Biden's actually now starting to be receptive to the idea. I got to thinking about the easiest way to do this, and you're going to think I'm absolutely batshit crazy. The easiest way to do this, you call up Madam Secretary Hillary Clinton. You call her up. America loves a comeback story. And I know a lot of people are, oh, God, that'd be crazy. But the woman won the popular vote in 2016. And were it not for a few pockets of folks who were just not enthused, we got more than a few pockets now, right? If it were not for like 3 pockets of unenthused voters in major metropolitan areas, Milwaukee, Detroit, where am I forgetting? Like Philadelphia, right? If it weren't for those three areas having subdued interest and energy in the ticket, and who wouldn't be? My God, it was Hillary Clinton, and it was the pro-life Tim Kaine. Terrible idea. Which is why if you're going to go Hillary Clinton, you also have to say, you know what? If you're going to skip over Kamala, you either better add her back to this ticket, or you go for, I don't know, Cory Booker, and you insist that Kamala Harris will be the next Supreme Court justice appointee or attorney general, with 2028 being like hers. Like we're going to set it up so that 2028 is yours to run. We need this transition president. There we go. Here we go again. That magnanimous one-term president. If it's going to be Hillary Clinton, I believe she has to say, I'm going to be that one-term transformational president who's going to executive order for my 4 years, not giving a rat's ass about getting reelected, and dare them to run against populist policy that we're going to put in place as much as is possible by executive order. I mean, could you do it? Yeah. But at the same time, I really think if you want to try and keep this party together and have a chance at winning in November of 2024, it's got to happen sooner than later, number one. And I think you have to rally behind Kamala Harris. You can't say that she was qualified to be vice president, but then not say she's qualified to be president in your inner mechanisms. It doesn't add up, right? You have her within a heart attack or a God forbid a fatal taking of his life from having Kamala be president of the United States anyway. So you already have assumed and told the American public that she is ready on day zero to step into the Oval Office and preside. And I happen to think she is. Listen, I think if anything we've learned from the Donald Trump presidency, it's this. Any fucking idiot could be president of the United States when you surround them with competent people. And Donald Trump came in with a lot of incompetent people. And he actually ran off the competent people that he had and is now running with a near slate of incompetence promised for the next 4 years, with only the incompetence that he had his first 4 years still clinging to him, licking on the boots as he marches his way back to the Oval Office now. I think if you're going to do this, Democrats, you're going to have to turn to Kamala Harris, and you're also going to have to, start spotlighting the lineup behind her. Who's going to be vice president? Man, I'd love to see Pete Buttigieg taking on J.D. Vance on a debate stage. I really would. I think that would be huge. And I've just been a huge fan of Pete and his oratory and his ability to handle going on Fox News and just slicing and dicing them mercilessly. I think he can do that. But I also don't know if America's ready for a gay vice president. I don't know. We weren't ready for a male first gentleman or second gentleman, but here we are. Democrats, you're on the clock. Are you going to get this right this time? I'm unsure, and I'm also very nervous. But you got to do something. You got to do something quick. We're all watching Joe. We're back after this on The Ron Show. In the home stretch, and I really hate that I'm only giving like 7 minutes to this story, but I think it's an important one to tell. Fox News poll came out recently this week that shows that the Supreme Court is not popular at all. I'm going to read directly from a Fox News article written by Victoria Ballara. That's right, from Fox News, okay? 2 weeks after the Supreme Court ruled in favor of presidential immunity, the latest Fox News national survey finds voters disapprove not only of that decision, but also think the court is too conservative and that partisanship plays a role in decisions. You don't say. In addition, a new low 38% approve of the job the Supreme Court is doing, down 3 points from April 2023 and down 20 points from a high of 58% in March of 2017. Remember back then, before Donald Trump appointments came in, you had a 5-4, slightly majority conservative Supreme Court back then. 60% disapprove of the court's performance. That is a high point, again, from the Fox News article. Since 2017, approval of the court is down 48 points among Democrats and down 29 points among independents, while approval has increased 12 months amongst Republicans. Also from CBS News yesterday.
CBS News has learned President Biden is considering a series of sweeping changes to the Supreme Court if he's reelected. The proposals, first reported by the Washington Post, include term limits for all 9 justices,
yes,
an enforceable ethics code,
yes,
and a potentially new constitutional amendment that would eliminate broader immunity for presidents and other constitutional office holders. The last proposal follows the High Court's conservative majority 6-3 ruling that said former President Donald Trump has immunity from prosecution for official acts taken in office. These changes would mark a major shift for President Biden, who once served as the Senate Judiciary Committee chairman and has indicated in the past he wouldn't make changes to the court.
I'm starting to think maybe I need to start putting together my own presidential campaign platform, because I don't disagree with what President Biden wants to do here. Term limits, yes. I think most Americans are, in fact, I know this. I've seen polling. Most Americans are for term limits. Unfortunately, I'm not sure how you do that without a constitutional amendment, if I'm being honest, and I am no constitutional scholar. But I also think that you could grow the court, and I think that, you got to have the House and the Senate. You've got to have a 60 votes in the Senate to pull this off. But I think growing the court is what makes sense, and I think it's all, again, Democrats, it's about messaging. It really is. It's all about messaging. We have 12 judicial circuits in this country. Why do we only have 9 justices? Why wouldn't you have 12 justices, one from and for each circuit? Now, that's going to take some time to sort out because you've got, several circuits that and some that don't have any. So, on those that are currently seated. So obviously you'll have to kind of let those work their way out of the system. But when you go replacing someone from a seat, you should have someone from a circuit that is unrepresented right now, maybe by a justice residing from or from that circuit to represent to me, that just makes the most sense. We are a representative republic after all, right? Why would we not have some sort of representation in a republic manner at the top of our court? 12 justices. And you're thinking, well, what about a tiebreaker? Hello, that's where you get the Chief Justice in. That's where the John Roberts comes in, or whoever the Chief Justice is going to be at that point in time. That's the number I think that's the magic number. I really do. I think as long as, and that's what you sell that to the American people, they're like, yeah, that makes sense. Why would we have 12 judicial circuits and only 9 justices? The math ain't mathin'. Even simple math folks can get that. Yeah, 12 justices, a chief justice to be the tiebreaker in case there needs to be a tiebreaker. And maybe you don't even invoke the chief justice unless you need a tiebreaker. That way you can have a strain of independence, coming out of your chief justice office. I like the idea of there being some ethics with some teeth to it. Some ethical reform is desperately needed. Clarence, I'm looking at you. Samuel, I feel like a third grade teacher. Clarence, Samuel, write your names on the blackboard. Dunce cap on, go to the principal's office. That's where we are. Again, and this is about messaging. You talk to the American people and you point out how simple this is. You think 9 justices is enough? By the way, there's nothing in the Constitution that spells out we have to have any certain number of justices on the Supreme Court. Did you know that? Again, it's messaging to the American people. You say there's actually no hardcore number that we have to stand by. Nobody ever said 9. We used to have more than 9. Did you know that? So we could have 12, which makes sense per district per judicial circuit. I speak for a living. And then the Chief Justice would be the important tie-breaking vote at number 13 if necessary. And I don't even care if you say, well, it needs to be that the Democratic president who's in office gets to seat the 3 that you're missing. I don't even care. Work out those mechanics however you will, okay? But we're playing with fire. We are absolutely playing with fire when you have a slightly majority liberal country. And I'm being kind when I say that, honestly. When you look at voter disenfranchisement and the way states like Georgia clearing the voter rolls out every few years and this, that, and the other, and suppression tactics, et cetera, and so on, we live in a majority liberal country. It doesn't always bear out by votes, but it's borne out by 7 of the last 8 popular votes when coming to vote for the office of the presidency, the highest office in the land. When you have 7 of the last 8 presidential elections telling you by popular vote that we are a majority liberal country, and yet you have a 66.5% conservative Supreme Court inflicting theirs and their party's will on the majority that disagrees with them wholeheartedly, man, you are playing with fire. You're asking for there to be some sort of anger or uprising or blowback. It's just, it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. So you got to figure out some kind of way to get this back to 5-4 or 6-6 with a conservative chief justice. If John Roberts wants to stay on, fine, do that. But you got to figure out a way to make the Supreme Court actually more representative of the will of the majority of the people and not a will of the majority of the electoral votes, which, by the way, could be addressed by uncapping the House. You've heard me say this before a million times, I'm sure. You uncap the House. Why are we stuck at 435? There's no reason for that. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that it has to be stuck at 435. It should be at least 1,000. It should probably be more like 1,200 since we've tripled in population since we stopped at 435. You uncap the House, California gets a proportion number of representatives, and then that starts to deal with some of the other more populous states like Texas. Not a blue state. Illinois, New York, or Florida. Yeah, I mean, that's how you fix the Electoral College too, right? Ron 2028, right? No, I'm sorry. Show notes, ronshowatl.com. See you tomorrow night at 10 a.m. on the American One Radio app at AmericanOneRadio.com. Take care.